Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mayor Richard Stewart. I'll be chairing the public hearing and the council meeting tonight. On behalf of City Council, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. This is a public hearing into the bylaws that will be introduced to you in a moment by the City Clerk. Council for the City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws and has directed that a public hearing be held. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will first present a summary of each of the proposed bylaws, and then the floor will then be open to anyone in attendance that wishes to present his or her views on the proposed bylaw that's before us at that moment. Those that have pre-registered will be given the first opportunity to speak, and then we'll open the floor. I stress to all of you that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaw to make that view known to council members. Council members are here with an open mind and are here to listen to your input. No one here has prejudged the outcome of these applications. But there are some rules that council has asked me to enforce. First of all, it's not a question and answer period. It's not an opportunity to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw on those council members or staff or those in the audience who might have a different point of view than your own. And so we ask everybody to please restrict your comments to the proposed bylaw. Be as brief and concise as possible. We are asking speakers to respect a 5-minute time limit in order that everyone who wishes to speak will be able to do so. Speakers are permitted to speak more than once. If you've still got some good stuff, please, you have to get to the back of the line and we'll hear from everyone at least once. And then anyone that has additional comments can offer them before we call the third and final time for reading, for hearing, for speakers on that item, and then we'll close that item. We ask that the audience be respectful of each speaker and allow that speaker to make his or her point without interruption. And we find it most effective if we ask everyone to please refrain from booing, refrain from even clapping, from laughing, cheering, all of the things that might intimidate someone who might be less than comfortable standing at the microphone. As chair of this hearing, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't relate to the proposed bylaw, that becomes abusive, or that becomes repetitive of views that the speaker has already made known to council members. Please note, we can't receive any information after we close an item at the public hearing until the item is decided upon. So if you have some written information that you want, you've got some good stuff that you want to be part of the public record, you have to hand it to that table before we close that item on tonight's agenda. After we close the item, please take it home with you because we can't receive it after we've closed that item. Immediately following adjournment of the public hearing tonight, we'll have a regular council meeting in order that council can give consideration to items on the public hearing agenda, but also a number of items on the City Council agenda. However, if during the public hearing council requests further information related to one of the items in the public hearing, we can defer consideration of that item pending receipt of the requested information. I'll now call upon Mr. Gilbert to introduce the bylaws on tonight's agenda and the Planning and Development staff to make a presentation on the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. First item this evening is an application to amend the zoning bylaw with changes to various sections of the zoning bylaw in order to improve overall clarity and administration.
Mr. Dahl.
Planner with the city.
Michael Dhaliwal, got it. Sorry, your microphone wasn't on. I wanted folks at home to know your name.
Your Worship and members of council, my name is Michael Dhaliwal, Development Planner with the city. This bylaw is proposing amendments to the zoning bylaw to improve clarity, revise references to incorrect subsections, remove regulations that are redundant or not required, tweak existing provisions slightly, and update zones to be consistent with other zones. It is not the intent of this bylaw to alter zoning provisions that would significantly impact or change development rights and the form and character of development. This slide shows some of the main areas of the bylaw that are being addressed. We are clarifying a number of definitions and adding a new definition. In the general regs section, the clarified regulations on the siting of bay windows and lane to street intersection sightline setbacks, and to permit evergreen line stations and substations in all zones. For the RTM1 zone, we are revising the maximum width of a garage to accommodate a two-car garage. In the RT1 zone, we're revising provisions to improve clarity. In the RM6 zones, we're revising the intent. The intent right now does not reflect how the zone is utilized, and remove a unit per hectare requirement that was inadvertently missed in a 2012 RM6 zoning update. In the C4 and C7 zones, we're revising setback regulations to clearly state the minimum and maximum setbacks for all buildings and structures. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4586, 2015.
Thank you. And believe it or not, there are no speakers registered for this item, so I'll ask, are there any speakers in the audience that wish to speak to this item? Are there any speakers for this item? And the third and final time, are there any speakers? Councillor Zerillo.
I just had a question on the Part 15 commercial zones. And it just talks about the revised setback regulations within the C4 City Commercial and Transit Village Commercial. And I was wondering if this will affect the current Blue Sky project that just got approved, if this will mean they don't need to come for a EVP.
Your Worship?
Ms. Tiffany.
No, it will not.
Thank you. I'll start again. Are there any speakers to this item? Are there any speakers to this item? The third and final time, are there any speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item closed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item number 2 is an application to enter into a heritage revitalization agreement and heritage designation bylaw for the properties at 1121, 1123, and 1135 Brunette Avenue, 209 and 213 Therrien Street, and 208 Begin Street. These are bylaw numbers 4592 and 4593.
Mr.
Your Worship and members of Council, these bylaws and development are being proposed as part of a heritage restoration and protection project. The site is located in Millardville, bounded by Therrien Street to the west and Begin Street to the east, and Brunette Avenue to the south. It is just east of the neighborhood center area of Millardville and across the street from Place des Arts. The current zoning on the site is C1, local commercial, where the former Trav's location was at 1121 Brunette, and RS1, one family residential. The site to the east is zoned RM2, three-story apartment. The site to the west is zoned RM4, multi-story high-density apartment. And the sites to the south are zoned P1, civic and major institutional, and RM4, multi-story high-density apartment. And the sites to the north are zoned RS1, one family residential. The site is currently designated urban townhousing. Adjacent land to the west is also designated urban townhousing. Land to the north is designated neighborhood attached residential, and land to the west is designated medium density apartment residential. Land to the south is designated civic and major institutional and medium density apartment residential. The applicant is proposing to protect and restore the heritage building through a heritage revitalization agreement and heritage designation bylaw. They're proposing 94 apartment units within 2 six-story apartment buildings and 14 townhomes in 2 townhouse buildings for a total of 108 units. As well, the heritage building will accommodate 2 commercial units at grade and 2 office units on the second story. A picture of what the project looks like at the corner of Therrien and Brunette. And the recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Heritage Revitalization Agreement Bylaw number 4592-2015 and give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Heritage Bylaw 4593-2015.
Thank you. And we have some speakers registered for this item. We'll begin with Blair Chisholm, who's a representative of the applicant with Brooke Pooney and Associates at 400 535 Thurlow in Vancouver. Ms. Chisholm.
Blair Chisholm with Brooke Pooney Associates. We're an urban planning firm and applicant for the revised Heritage Revitalization Agreement before your worship and council this evening. I'm here with other members of the project team, including Matthew Chang Architects, Don Luxton and Associates, our heritage consultants, the agency, which are a real estate and marketing group, and representatives from the Apollo group. Just wanted to provide a little bit of background about the Apollo group. They were established in 2010 with single-family residential construction as their focus. In 2011, Apollo started to work on multifamily projects. Their first, which is currently under construction in Port Coquitlam, and the other being the Red House here in Coquitlam. As staff indicated, the Red House is across the street from the Place César Heritage Square in Maillotville. To the south, east, and west of the site are existing medium-density residential developments, and to the north of the site are single-family houses. The Red House has had a long, storied past here in this community. Its origins as a mushroom barn built in 1912 behind the house of once Coquitlam councillor Thomas Allard. The barn was sold in 1920 to a pipe fitter at Fraser Mills, who relocated the house to its current location. The structure was then transformed into a residential apartments to help provide much-needed housing for Fraser Mills workers. Unfortunately, the more recent years have not been kind to the property. A mishmash of commercial and residential tenants, infrequent maintenance, 2 fires, and a demolition permit. The Red House has seen better days. And that is exactly why today is an exciting milestone for this community. The proposal in front of council is feasible and is a key piece to revitalizing Maillardville and completing the frontage along Brunette. For some additional context related to the properties, I wanted to run through the application history. Mr. Jang owned the land surrounding the Red House and was approached in 2011 with the opportunity to rehabilitate the structure through a heritage revitalization agreement. He ended up purchasing the once fired Red House for over $1.25 million back in 2011 and began working with city staff at that time through the technical site planning process to develop the original heritage revitalization agreement. The proposal was given third reading by council at the end of November 2013. Immediately following third reading, the owner focused on the negotiations for the corner lot, which was not in the owner's possession at the time the HRA was brought forward. Mr. Jung ultimately overpaid for the corner lot by approximately $250,000. This sale was completed around the same time our firm was brought on to rethink the project. Our firm was engaged in July 2014 through the recommendation of the agency, a local marketing firm who was approached by Mr. Jung, the owner of the Apollo Group, who asked them point blank, will this project work? The answer was no. The project approved in November 2013 inevitably was not properly scoped. A pro forma was never completed, and land acquisition and rehabilitation costs were not properly considered. In November 2014, the project team pulled together a new proposal for the 6 properties. Our team worked with city staff over the past year to resolve several technical planning issues. Our firm has been engaged in the Maillardville neighborhood for years, starting with our firm's involvement with Fraser Mills and the importance of seeing good connections between this community and the waterfront, to being an original member of the planning advisory group when the Maillardville neighborhood planning process began in 2009. The proposal in front of you this evening anchors this council's commitment to Maillardville. It is directly in line with the neighborhood plan that requires the use of heritage revitalization agreements to rehabilitate and protect heritage buildings located on redevelopment sites. The proposal includes the rehabilitation and legal protection of the Red House, 94 condominiums in 2 structures set back generously from Brunette to ensure appropriate sightlines along Brunette to the red house. 14 townhouses adjacent to the single family to the north ensure that there's appropriate transition between the properties. The owners are also proposing a commercial use for the red house that includes the potential for a cafe and offices. The owner is interested in relocating his offices currently in Burnaby to this location. The proposed use also ensures that the structure will be accessible with the integration of an elevator and appropriate ramping into the design. There are also significant road dedications and improvements proposed along Brunette, Big N, and Therrien to accommodate on-street parking, street trees, and sidewalks. The owner will also be purchasing the east-west lane, which you can, it's essentially where the line is, the black line on the screen right now, the thick black line on the screen right now. He will also be purchasing the east-west lane from the city at the appraised value. That lane will be transformed into a publicly accessible mews, providing mid-block east-west pedestrian connections. There are significant improvements proposed for the Brunette frontage, including approximately 5,000 square feet of open space, with garden plots to the east of the red house to commemorate the farming heritage of the mushroom barn, and to the west is a French-inspired heritage interpretation publicly accessible open space. Last week, the first reading of the revised heritage revitalization bylaw, at the beginning of the month, brought up several questions and comments from council. The owner has asked that we relay this information on his behalf. Mr. Jang sent a formal apology to the city on October 22nd. He has acknowledged his inexperience with protecting the heritage structure and understands that the tarping and infrequent site visits were insufficient to ensure the regular maintenance of the site. He's engaged on Lexton & Associates to provide oversight and guidance on the temporary and ultimate protection of the structure moving forward. After this first step of tarping the site, a scaffolding company and engineer will be engaged, and quotes for this effort have been received, and the costs are not insignificant. The landowner admits that the building was not maintained to the standard that was expected of him, but he is committed to ensuring its protection moving forward. The status quo, however, does no one any good, and we believe the proposal in front of your worship and council is the best alternative to moving forward. There are several other questions at the first reading of this bylaw, such as why have additional costs being incurred? I indicated earlier that there was no pro forma that was ever completed. The owner has over-purchased or at speculative land prices for both the corner lot and the red house. Currently, the owner has paid $4.6 million in land costs associated with a 1.3-acre site. The unexpected fire at the red house in August 2012 has increased the rehabilitation costs of the structure, the restoration and design of the heritage structure, as well as the cost in upgrading offsite civil works on 3 sides of the property amounting to 675 lineal feet of frontage. These costs were never considered in a formal pro forma. So why is the increase in density need? It's to make the project financially feasible, to ensure the project can realistically get financed and move forward, and for the construction of high-quality public open space along the entire Brunette frontage, and for the rehabilitation of the red house. There was a question about how residents will know whether they're allowed to use the park space. Well, the open space along Brunette is designed to be a high-quality landscaped heritage interpretive area. There will be signage installed identifying the space as park and the importance of the heritage structure. And there was a question about how many townhouse uses could be developed on the site if there was no HRA that was to move forward. And townhouse development on this site is just simply not feasible. The original proposal, there was another question that was about the heights and views around the property. So the original proposal included 4 to 5 story structures stepped with the slope, but then transitioning down to the 3-story townhouses at a height that's in line with the adjacent multifamily. The revised proposal is for 5 to 6 stories in the 2 structures set back from Brunette, and again the 3-story townhouses adjacent to the single family. The existing trees, which you can see in some of these sites, the top picture shows the view looking south from Big Inn. To immediately below that is looking south from Therrien, and to the left of that is looking south from Queenston. The trees in these pictures are between 40 and 50 feet in height and already impact the existing views of the surrounding community. As well as staff indicated at the time, most of the houses on Therrien and Big Inn are east-west oriented, and having been to the site several times in the last couple of weeks, most of the neighbors' windows do not actually face towards the Fraser River. So over the past few weeks, I've also reconnected with a few community groups and residents in the area, and I've been hearing that people just want to see something move forward at the site. I just spoke with Reg from the Coquitlam Heritage Society this evening, and he said headed in support of anything that just retains heritage. The Red House is part of the heritage of the community, and the alternative to not moving forward is further delay and a risk of the structure and this heritage being lost. If the project proceeds, I would like to see the owner committed through a legal agreement to advance construction in a timely manner. I know he is committed to the Red House and will be bringing his offices on site if the project moves forward. I'd also like to see better connections to the Place Cesar and would propose that this get studied further when the DP is advanced. Maribville needs projects such as this one to move forward and to bring more people to the area to help create the vibrancy in this community. In conclusion, I'd like to thank you and your council for listening. I know there's been a lot of time taken in the review of this proposal today.
Blair? Sorry. For clarification of one point you made. You said townhouse development on the site isn't feasible. I assume you mean economically feasible based on the price someone paid for the land.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
On this, the picture that you're showing on the very corner, is there another story? It's 6 stories, correct? So there must be another window I'm missing.
It's 5 stories in the front, and then it goes up to 6 stories right immediately behind. It's stepped.
Okay. How many, so there'd be what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6-story?
Windows, is that what you're wondering?
Yeah,
Along that elevation?
that's okay. I'll just,
It's almost as though it stays at 5-story as it steps up, is what it looks like
Right.
on the rendering.
Thank you.
Well, there's a 6-story. Yeah.
yes, no, that's what I meant. This one shows the 6 and the other one didn't.
Yep.
5, oh,
Yeah,
6
the
in the middle.
The east elevation shows 6 stories for half of the face.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Rosemary Baker at 1117 Quadling. Long time. Good to see you again.
Good evening to Mayor Richard Stewart and council members. My name is Rosemary Baker, and I live at 1117 Quadling Avenue, which is right at the end of Therrien. So I look down Therrien and to Brunette. My biggest concern with this development is traffic flow. In that picture, I'm pretty much...
Yeah, if you put your mouse over there.
Yeah. Right now, we have the apartment, 81 units, right on the corner of Brunette, Therrien, and Marmont. Traffic coming from that apartment or going to it, coming down Marmont, have to turn right on Quadling and go down Therrien. Traffic coming out of there, if they wish to go east, have to come up Therrien, turn right on Quadling. Quadling Avenue at Marmont is 1 lane wide. Quadling at Begin is 1 lane wide. Last week, I was almost hit at the corner of Quadling and Begin, walking east on Quadling, right at the corner. Someone was coming down Begin, making a right-hand turn onto Quadling, was going too fast, and I was able to get right up against the retaining wall to the elderly home that's there. With this new proposal, which I'm in favor of the land being developed, but what is going to happen with all this traffic when you're going to have over 100 units in this area, and on average you've got 2 vehicles per unit? where is all that traffic going to go? We've got lots of little children walking to and from school. And people coming up Therrien, they're supposed to stop at Quadling. Many times they don't. Tonight when I came home from work, I come up Marmont, I make a right-hand turn onto Quadling. I literally stop on Marmont, get myself as close to the curb as possible to make my corner onto Quadling. And then as I'm driving east, when I get to Therrien, the house there right on the corner, southwest corner, the shrubs are overgrown and there's parked cars that you cannot see the traffic on Therrien coming up. And too many times, even though there's a stop sign, people don't stop. And then now tonight, I only found out that this unit's going to be 6 stories high. That's my biggest concern.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say, to staff, I don't see a west elevation on, maybe I've missed it. I've seen all of the other elevations. I don't see where traffic comes out of the building to the west. Is there access to the parking from Therrien? It seems to show it in the plan view, but it doesn't show it in well, I don't have a section. I don't have a elevation either.
Your Worship, yes, thank you. And good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll turn over to Michael Dhaliwal, the file manager in the application, and I think he'll refer you to attachment 3. It's an overall site plan, also identifies where the parkade access points are. So, Michael, you just want to walk us through that?
Through your worship, there's one access point for all the parking. It's from Big Ann Street. Attachment 3 and a little bit more clear on attachment 6. You can see the driveway let down. It's just north of the first apartment building, in between the apartments and the townhouse. Or as part of the apartment building, just on the north edge of it.
Okay, so the letdown that's shown on Therrien is for emergency access.
Your worship, that is correct.
Okay. But no speakers. Thank you very much. I think it's the same family, same address, same last name. We'll go with Christine Baker. She's not able to make it? Okay, fair enough. That's okay. There you go. Councillor O'Neill has a question, and then we'll open the floor. Second.
On the specific question of increased traffic, has a traffic study been done about what the road network in the area is like and whether or not it can handle the increased traffic that would accompany such a development? I don't know if the developer has that answer or somebody on staff.
No, over to Mr. Dhaliwal.
Your worship, both the city's transportation department and the applicant's transportation consultant, Bunt, have studied the site and have determined that the traffic can be accommodated. Both Big Ann and Therrien are being widened, and the parking access is from Big Ann, so they are going to widen it and provide on-street parking and make it a more safer condition. And the intent is to continue that widening as you head north on Big Ann in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, but obviously that doesn't solve the challenge of access from Marmont to the site, which would be, most people would turn east on Quadling, or hopefully not Quadling, but perhaps Quadling, which is an inadequate road and looks like it will stay an inadequate road until development takes place at both ends. Was that included in the traffic study? Does Mr. Diozegi have something?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add that, as Mr. Dhaliwal mentioned, Traffic studies have been carried out, and the Transportation Planning Division is in agreement with the developer's consultant in this respect. But it's very important to highlight that while this proposed development would generate substantial traffic in the neighborhood, the surrounding street upgrades, which are or would be a requirement for the development, would provide a safer condition both for pedestrians as well as for vehicles, in part because of the road width, in part because of the sidewalk, as well as the visibility generally considered to be better. Now, to answer directly to your second question, no, the traffic study by the developer did not include to the level of details for Quadling that would provide a solid answer. But as you are aware of it, in conjunction with the area planning process, we do have some results that will show that over time the traffic can be and will be managed.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill, nothing else?
No, thanks.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? At this point, if there are any, just put your hand up. We'll try to recognize you and you'll step up to the microphone. Sir, in the back, please step up.
Hello, my name is Philip Christie. I reside at 1113 Quadling. And yes, my concerns were traffic as well, but seeing as the underground parking, the only place it's coming out is onto Begin, is that correct? So there would be no traffic being funneled onto Therrien? Okay. The property's been vacant for 22 years. We've watched garbage being dumped there and all sorts of nefarious activities. So it's nice to see that it's being redeveloped. I particularly like the Red Barn being revitalized. It's been a bit of a neighborhood eyesore with various tarps and fires and just garbage. So it's good to see, and particularly being right across from Place Millardville to keep the heritage of the area would be great, and we could use some more people in Millardville. Most of the residents have gotten older, and there's not a lot of kids around, so it'd be nice to see it revitalized. My only concern is Therrien is that it's extremely narrow, and the same with Quadling. So perhaps some resident-only parking. We already get some parking from the existing condos. They park on Quadling and then go down because there's no parking on Marmont for them, and there's no parking on Brunette. So they take up the parking up in our neighborhood, so which is understandable. But however, we would like the parking in our block to be for people from that block. So perhaps council could consider something, residents of Quadling Avenue parking only. And that's about all the concerns I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Morrison.
Confirm that as a part of this, that on Therrien and Begin, there would be off-street or on-street parking with the widening and the.
Through your worship, that is correct.
So part of our last speaker's concerns may well be addressed in that there would be on-street parking available to address the units that are there and those that would be proposed.
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay. As to the concerns on Quadling, the entrance points at Marmont and the exit point or another point at Begin, are those one lane specifically? Is there something in the works for that, or are we strictly at the mercy of what might happen in future? Were those designed initially as half roads? I know it predates all of us, but.
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, by and large, unless my colleague, the General Manager of Engineering and Public Works, has a master road plan for the area, it's typically, and admittedly, we do have some oddball situations through the Mardville neighborhood because there's some interesting historic street patterns there, different streets and layouts, and in some cases it's just simply half streets. And typically what we do is where development applications come up, and certainly when it's going to higher density, we will look at those those opportunities to get the necessary road widenings and road frontage upgrading requirements. I think there's been some areas where there has been, but it's more focused along the major arterials, where the city will take a more active role and undertake road works that might be funded under the city's development cost charge or DCC program. So typically with the local roads, it's more opportunistic, waiting for development to happen. That said, though, on occasion, I know the engineering department does have road repaving programs that they do. It's on a priority basis. And sometimes they will address where it's possible with modest expenditures to take care of some of those narrow half lane or half road situations. So.
Joseph.
Oh, Mr. Diozeki.
Your Worship, just to add to Mr. McIntyre's comments, the engineering department at this point don't have plans for upgrading that section of Quad Link, and the primary difficulty is that if you look at the intersection, which is practically at the intersection of Quad Link and Begin Street, in the northwest quadrant, there's an existing building which is extremely close to the edge of, on the northerly edge of the pavement. So for all practical purposes, it's virtually impossible to widen that road until perhaps several properties change or redevelop in the future.
So that would be at the intersection with Begin, correct?
That is correct.
Would it be possible or appropriate that should this proceed, that staff could at least report back in terms of the viability of ensuring that whatever space is currently available is captured for us to utilize and make that space as wide as possible as it comes off of Marmont to maximize safety? At least report back and identify whether or not there may be a meter or two that might be available. Is that the realistic expectation?
On Quad Link or in general?
On specifically, you seem to have addressed Quad Link and Begin. I'm wondering at the other end, at Quad Link and Marmont. Perhaps again, should this go forward, that perhaps staff can bring back some information as to whether or not there's any additional space or if it's currently being utilized and paved 100%. I don't need an answer on is it right now, but at least have somebody go out and take a look at it.
Yes, we will take a look at it. The difficulty what I have is that looking at the aerial, Marmont seemingly has curb and gutter on both sides. In other words, that street is well established. For Quad Link, it's a very different case. And again, in this case, at the intersection of Marmont and Quad Link in the northeast quadrant, again, there's a building which is very, very close to the northerly edge of the pavement. So again, we are dealing with practicalities here. And off the top of my head, looking at the aerial, it's very unlikely that we would be able to make any substantial improvements in the short term.
Yeah, I appreciate practicalities, and it's very unlikely. I would just ask that if we do move forward, that we at least look at it on the ground and maybe measure it out, just to ensure. I think it's appropriate that we address whatever concerns have been brought forth, and I think Ms. Baker had the legitimate concern with regard to safety, and if there's an opportunity to enhance it a bit while we wait for things to further develop in the area, I think that it's appropriate that we at least take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah. Keeping in mind that in most of these circumstances, the land that we could use for road, either one side or the other, is private property, so it does mean trying to willing seller, willing buyer, or
Absolutely. That's what I'm asking. If there's
appropriation.
anything that's available for us within the right of way.
And on the Marmont end, I think there's probably an existing non-conforming setback on the north side where it's something like 4 feet by the look of the satellite from the stop sign to the side of the house. So I suspect we're gonna find, as we have in a couple of other situations where we examine more closely, we're gonna find that every inch has been taken up already by road that isn't privately owned, and even if, in a few instances, there's roadway on private property. But it's worth looking at again. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any speakers who haven't spoken yet? Sir?
Is the microphone on? Yeah. So my name's Andy Dade, and I live at 1200 Brunette, kitty corner to this development. And I urge you to reject this development proposal as outlined. In short, the proposal is too many units in too small an area. I agree that the property should be developed, but not at the density currently proposed. Let's look at the numbers. With 94 apartments at full occupancy, there must be 94 people who will be moving in or out of the complex on a daily basis. If they're working people, that means entering or exiting off Brunette Avenue with a vehicle or on foot 5 days a week from a space that is only a half a block long. Next, you have 14 townhouses, which I presume are not one-bedroom units, but have 2 or more people living in them. Let's say, for argument's sake, that half the units are occupied by only one person, and to be conservative, each of these people have a vehicle. That's an additional 14 vehicles trying to get onto Brunette in the morning, most of whom are going west. The traffic congestion on Brunette, on the approaches to Highway 1 and Columbia, are horrendous. The traffic is regularly backed up past Allard on a normal day. If there are problems on the freeway, then the traffic exits off Brunette or further east at the Coquitlam exit in order to get onto Lougheed westbound. The resulting traffic jam on the Brunette interchange lasts for hours. Let's address the issue of the retail outlets. So where is the parking for the customers? If the parking is provided at the back with no street parking, the owner will have a tough time finding any tenants. One needs to look no further than the new building at the corner of Brunette and Lebleau, which has street-level retail spaces for lease and is still unoccupied a year later. The Brunette corridor has a bus route and an emergency vehicle route designation and restricted parking in both the morning and the afternoon rush. So let's not complicate matters by adding to the traffic volume unnecessarily. Let's send the developer back to the drawing board and come up with a more reasonable proposal. That's simply good planning.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for the first time on this item? Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Israel.
I just had a question about the heritage value. I mean, I've read through the report. I just wanted to know if staff still feels at this stage of the game, with the neglect that's been involved, if this still has the same potential. And the other thing I wanted to ask is, when this first came to public hearing, there was quite a, well, I shouldn't say quite a few, but there were people that spoke more about Trev's having more significant heritage value to them than to the Red House. So two questions. One, does staff really still feel that the Red House should be saved at the same level it was a few years ago? And if they have looked at the potential of Trev's having more importance to the community than the other building?
Mr. Dhaliwal.
Trev's.
Through your worship, yes, speaking for staff, we still do believe that the heritage structure still has heritage value. It was a significant heritage building in Millardville, and their consultant, Don Luxton Consultants, did do an updated report after the fire to assess the heritage value and determine the number of items that can be salvaged, restored, and the building would be brought back up to a significant standard as opposed to just tearing it down and losing this heritage structure. Based on our heritage lists, the heritage structure, the Red House, is of more value than Trev's. And their consultant is here today, should you want to ask some questions directly.
I guess my question, I would ask one other thing. I mean, the heritage talks about the windows and the sashes, and I mean, is it possible for that to be incorporated in another way, or does it have to be this freestanding unit, or this freestanding building? Can it be incorporated into the development in a different way rather than a freestanding building?
Mr. Dhaliwal.
Through your worship, part of restoring buildings like this is to use windows or other heritage items that might have been saved from other projects that can be incorporated to maintain the same look. Taking the pieces from this building and trying to restore it on a new development would take away from the goal of trying to restore a heritage building. Even though you would have the heritage pieces on a new build, it would not have the same type of meaning.
Thank you.
That question is probably best posed to the heritage consultant, and I'd be pleased to invite him up to address it if you like. Councillor Zerlo. No? Oops. I won't invite him.
Good evening. My name is Christine Doinghaus. I work with Donald Luxton Associates. I'm a heritage consultant. And we fully agree with Mr. Dhaliwal's explanation. Technically, it may be feasible to remove certain building components and to put them onto a new construction, but it would lose its historic meaning and context. They would be used as artifacts where it would be really possible to reinstate them within the historic resource. So it would retain its integrity and its meaning, and I think that is what we are all trying to aim for, to preserve Millardville heritage by restoring original material in the original location. This is a significant component of a heritage process and strategy according to Parks Canada. And that is our guiding principle, to follow Parks Canada's standards and guidelines for historic buildings. And it's encouraged to restore original materials where possible. Yes. No.
I had thought this one.
It was relocated in 1920, that's correct.
So most of
but it is the original building, not the original location. My apologies.
All right, thank you.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you.
And for that, well, excuse me a moment. Yeah. And for that matter, not the current location either.
Correct. It's proposed to relocate it again within the city block, which is doable. Yeah.
A little bit to the east.
Correct.
So on the drawing here, perhaps stepped over one full building width.
Yeah.
To the east and located in a new place. Correct. On a new foundation. While you're here, how much we saw pictures of the attempt, well, the failed attempt to protect it from the elements. We assume that the elements have taken hold. It's been a year after the fire, and with very little successful attempt to protect it from the elements. I assume that causes some damage.
We assume, yes, unfortunately. There's probably more decay that happened. There's moisture ingress. We are dealing with a timber structure. And the goal would be to protect it a little bit better. And I think the project team is putting all effort into it to protect it better. And as it was outlined earlier this evening, a scaffolding company is being involved, and we are trying to come up with a better solution to protect this so it can be restored, and relocated and restored.
Okay. Now, restoring it would take what? Describe the restoration process. I assume it's being somewhat dismantled.
Oh, we hope not.
You hope to retain it and build the portions back that have been damaged by weather or by fire?
Well, I think it would require further structural investigation. Again, the project team has to come together, and all the professionals have to come up with a solution. But hopefully, it can be stabilized in place, so it can be relocated to the new location within the city block, and then being restored. That would be ideally the way we would approach it. And there are special restoration companies who are specialized in this work, who we would recommend to carry this out.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any speakers, other speakers to this item? Any other speakers for the first time to this item? Any other speakers? I'm going to go back to Rosemary, who had her hand up to speak to us to it a second time. Ms. Baker.
Thank you. I'd like to clarify on the buildings the houses that are on the corner of Begin and Quadling on the north and the south side. On the northwest corner on Quadling, that property has just recently been sold, and there'll be a new house going in. And the property goes right up to Quadling. On the south side, that home is there. There is a little bit of land, but it, again, is right on the street, right on the property line.
In fact, the aerial photo that's before us on the screen shows.
And then at Marmont and Quadling, both properties on the north side on Quadling and the south side are right on the street. There is no room for expanding Quadling at those two ends. The only way that, for myself, I've lived there now for 33 years, the only way that Quadling could have been widened at Marmont and Begin would have been for the city to have bought the land when, at that time, whenever those houses came up for sale. That's what I'd like to bring to your attention. There is no way that you can expand Marmont and Quadling and Begin and Quadling. And that is my biggest concern with having another major development down the street. I'm anxious to see that land developed and not have it empty like that for so many years, but just concerned about how much development will be in there and the number of residents and where the traffic's going to flow. Thank you.
Thank you. One last question to staff from me. How many visitors parking? I saw it here once. How many visitors parking spaces are there? About 110 units.
Through your worship, there's 24 visitor stalls.
And and residential stalls, there's how many total?
There's 147 residential stalls 8 commercial spaces, and there'll be on-street parking in front on Begin, Therrien, and Brunette Avenue.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I have a general question about heritage revitalization agreements in Millardville. The Heritage Conservation and Commemoration section of the Millardville Neighborhood Plan, which is 3.8 in the plan, Policy B says, require heritage revitalization agreements for development sites with heritage buildings. So I just want to make sure I know exactly what this means. So under this policy, which council adopted, the developer must save the building if he wants to redevelop. Is that correct?
Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Essentially, yes. Council will recall we've been using the Heritage Revitalization Agreements, HARs for a while in the Millardville area. I think, by and large, to good effect. When the Millardville plan was reviewed and updated just a year or two ago, there was discussion around that. It was felt before the policy towards heritage assets was a little persuasive and not all that, it could be strengthened. And I think that was one of the policy decisions that was weighed at the time. And at the end of that consideration, that's the policy that was written into the plan. So yes, it does step it up. It's, I think it's in recognition that really the true heritage assets in that area, there's a number of them, but there's a limited number. And where there's opportunity and there's the framework through the HRA development application process to preserve it and give it new life, but at the same time allow for some sensitive infill, that was the desirable option, and that was the decision of the time in approving and creating the neighborhood plan.
So when a developer, such as the one before us today, says that the only way I can do this is to have this sort of density, the only decision left for the council at that stage, after listening to the public and listening to the developer, is whether or not we believe that this is the only economically viable way to do it, or whether we have some other information that suggests that no, we really think it can be done for less density and therefore it's not as expensive. Is there, I would like to know if there's any report that's been done, or maybe anybody out in the audience who actually has some evidence that would contradict what the developer has said. The developer said this is the only density that makes this project work. Is there anything out there, anything from staff, anything from the public that says, well, no, we've done an economic study that says it can work at this level?
Well, there is one that contradicted, and that was the developer's previous proposal.
Well,
Mr. McIntyre?
Yes, Your Worship, that's a particularly difficult question, and it's typically an area that we don't venture into at the staff level. With the HRAs, again, they're challenging applications, because on one hand you want to protect and restore and give new life to that heritage asset, but we recognize there's a trade-off, that with that there will be some redevelopment. So then the question is, what scale and type and ultimately the density of redevelopment that happens. Sometimes it's necessary to shift the heritage buildings around to sort of land up on a more logical layout, and that's what's proposed here. I guess at the end of the day, though, with those types of applications, staff will look at it and see what is being proposed, and is the building form and location and setbacks and scale, is it in keeping with the neighborhood? Is it in keeping with protecting that heritage building? And we'll make that sort of more planning and site planning assessment we don't ask to see a pro forma for the development project. We don't review the developer's financials. That's a private matter we leave to them. And
Right. And so on the things that you said that you are responsible for, you've recommended second and third reading after the public hearing. So we know that you think that that the form and the mass, the density, the slight relocation of the building works from the planning point of view. You don't know about the finances, and we have actually no evidence whatsoever in front of us that contradicts the developer's assertions that this project at its current proposed density is needed to make this work. So I just wanted to get that clear. Thank you very much.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just in referencing something Councillor O'Neill mentioned about the heritage revitalization plans, Trebs being commercial isn't, we don't require it to be revamped, because that to me is really special.
Through the chair, and I'll quickly turn to Michael because he is more up on these two buildings than I am. But it doesn't matter the nature or the use or the history of the building. It's more its heritage, character, and quality. And in this case, I understand that the Red Barn, when you look at it from a heritage perspective, is a greater value at the end of the day than the Trez building is. So, Michael, is there any other thing you can comment about Trez relative to the Red Barn?
But isn't Trev's in better shape than the Red Barn? I mean, almost anything's in better shape than the Red Barn.
The shed at the Booth House.
Through your worship, the focus on the Red House was based on the 1986 heritage inventory that was taken that classified the Red House as an important heritage structure. Trebs, while, in all due respect, is in much better condition at this time, is not deemed to see the same heritage status or importance as the Red House.
By who?
Through our own list that was adopted in 1986, and we can, if we want to review the status of the house again, we could.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to parking. I still had a question. Hi.
Hi. I know. I'm from
Why don't I
the
ask?
side of
Are
the
there any
room,
other speakers to this item?
comparatively.
Then?
I'm Janet Clough, and I live on Burke Mountain, which is the other opposite end of this neighborhood. But I do travel in this community for my work. And my question would be: is I'm hearing density, I'm hearing parking, I'm hearing traffic. Are the streets on Therrien, and I guess Began is on the east side, is it, going up? How wide exactly are they going to be? You're saying that you're going to have allow for a lane for parking. What about pedestrian traffic? Are you allowing also for sidewalks? The schools in this area are all to the north and the west. I would think that this would be in the catchment of Alderson. Pardon? There are sidewalks in place?
The sidewalks are part of the development on the two side
Therrien,
streets. Yeah.
including, so it's going to be narrow as well as also accommodating sidewalks.
Sorry?
On each side of the development, the lane is narrow.
No. Okay. The reference to the narrowness of the roadway is on Quadling. The Quadling is the
A block
east
north.
to west. And at both ends of Quadling, there isn't the full 66-foot road allowance that would normally be there to allow a 30-foot pavement. It's instead about 20 feet of roadway.
Right.
So there's not enough pavement for two cars to pass at the two ends of Quadling. But we can't make this developer do anything up there. This developer will be required to put in a full regular city street, which includes sidewalks both sides, or sidewalks on his frontage, and street parking with curb bulges and all kinds of things that Councillor Reid likes.
Okay. So that's being considered, though, when you're saying you've got 90 plus units going into this area, which direction students would be walking. Millardville is the middle school above. Alderson would be the catchment to the west, which means children would be traveling across both Marmont and Blue Mountain. So hopefully we're looking ahead as well for traffic controls to accommodate safe passage through there, because we are having a lot more density. Hopefully we have more families moving into this area. And is that wise in that location, as somebody else has pointed out? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I did have a question about parking. On the retail side, there's we envision actually retail, not just office on the second story, but retail. And where's the retail on-site parking? I gather it's underground off of, again, officially speaking, but they're probably intended for it to be the street parking on Brunette. Mr. Dollywall.
Through your worship, that is correct. The commercial parking is provided in the underground structure, access from Begin on the first floor as you come into the development, so they wouldn't have to circle about in the underground structure as well. That was one of the efforts to create the on-street parking on Brunette Avenue, was to make the commercial a viable space and have some easy access parking spots for users.
And so that commercial, or that on-street parking is actually recessed from the current curb. The curb and sidewalk will be ripped out, made another lane with bulges or parking pockets, and moved further north into the property.
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, just so I got this correct, and I'm glad Councillor O'Neill read the passage from the Millardville Neighborhood Plan where it said heritage structures must be saved. Is that only if they have the heritage designation? And does the Red Barn have a heritage designation, or is it a nice to have save?
Mr. McIntyre, could you please explain the heritage?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's some really good questions there, and it gets a little murky at times. As mentioned before, in the neighborhood plan, it sort of took stock of what had been happening in recent years in Millardville. And as Michael mentioned, there's been various inventories done over time. I think one back in '86, another one I think in the mid-'90s. Those are simply listings. It's just a list in a file somewhere of buildings, of properties, and the buildings, and a little bit of history about that building, why it's significant. It has no bearing. It's just simply a reference list that we have. When someone comes forward and they want to do something with that property, we check through our software system, and if that list will then pop up on that property, and we'll say, oh, hang on a second, that's just maybe a garage structure there that has value. There's an old building. And often the property owner knows that too. In fact, there's developers that key on these sort of sites because they can see it as an opportunity to do something creative there. Is once we get into that process of discussion with the property owner if they want to redevelop the property, and we'll now with the strength of this Millardville neighborhood plan policy, we direct them into going through an HRA. Through that process, we will actually, one of the conditions that we're seeking, that's one of the bylaws that's before council tonight, is to have the property have a heritage designation. Okay, so the HRA, the Heritage Revitalization Agreement, sort of sits on the property, like this. Essentially it's a development agreement. It says you protect, restore that heritage building, commit to doing certain things to maintain it over time, will allow this development form and density. Along with that, we sort of double down. We then put a heritage designation on the property, which is one of the strongest ways in British Columbia to protect a property, aside from being publicly owned. And it really locks in that there's a heritage asset, a structure on that property, and it gives it protection such that if the property owner wants to change it over time, they need permission. They want to change the color, they want an addition, anything like that. It really, it's a way of taking that heritage asset and moving it off a list, an inventory list, onto protected status, if you will.
And I apologize because I was trying to find something as you were answering the question earlier. So just to clarify, this property does not have to be saved. Like when
It doesn't legally have to.
Yes. Yes. We will make best efforts, but there's no requirement that the developer save this particular building.
Well, no, I would suggest that through that policy neighborhood plan, what the city is signaling clearly to a property owner that has a heritage asset, if you want to redevelop that property, the application process that we're looking for you to go through, we're requiring you to go through, is a heritage revitalization agreement process.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? For the third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next item on the agenda, item 3, is an application to amend City Coquitlam zoning bylaw in order to rezone the property at 920 Rochester Avenue from RS1 one-family residential to RT1 two-family residential. This is bylaw number 4597.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. The subject site is located on Rochester Avenue, east of Blue Mountain Street. The site and surrounding area is designated neighborhood attached residential under the city's official community plan. Zoning on the site and the surrounding area is RS1, one-family residential, and the site currently has a single-family dwelling. The applicant is requesting rezoning to RT1, two-family residential in conformance with the city's OCP land use designation to facilitate subdividing the existing lot into two single-family residential lots. As a result, staff are recommending second and third readings, actually final, all fourth and final readings of Bylaw 4597.
Thank you. We have only one speaker registered, and that's the applicant, Arwinder Parmar of Harriman Development, Inc. at 4848 Killarney Street in Vancouver. Good day, sir.
Good evening, Your Worship, Council members. My name is Harwinder Parmar from Harriman Developments, and like Erica mentioned, we're here tonight requesting that you approve this two-lot subdivision on 920 Rochester. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to come up today and speak to you is I know in the past with these kind of developments there have been questions regarding parking, massing, and how the project will look. So I've asked our designer to kind of give you guys some preliminary elevations on what this will actually look like when it's all said and done. So as you can see right now, this is the site plan that we used for our sub through the city. In the front, we have our the upgrades that the developers do in terms of sidewalks, street lighting, visitor parking, all the curb and gutter upgrades that generally are done. In the back, instead of doing a carriage home or any secondary structure, what we've done is we've moved the garage right up to the house to allow for a driveway in the back. And as part of that driveway, we've designated one parking stall there for the suite. So that's kind of how we're getting to our parking requirements. So the two stalls for the house itself, and then the one for the suite. Perfect. So this is the front elevation for the two homes. You can see that they're basically mirrors of each other with some subtle differences. 2 stories facing the street, so we're trying to keep our massing low and provide some character to the area from the housing side. And then this is the rear elevation, so you can see the garage with a deck above it, kind of keeping everything attached to the house from that side.
Okay, we got questions from a couple of people. If you want to hang on a second, they might include questions to you. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you. Just backing up a couple slides that you showed us with the park. From what we have in our package at attachment 4, in our package that shows the two pad parking are together in the center, and I'm just wondering, is that the houses been moved further apart, or why is the discrepancy between what we're seeing?
Sorry, in the Your Worship, in the initial application that was done a while back. It was supposed to be just a preliminary parking plan to kind of give an idea of what we were looking at doing. This is more of the actual design that we'll be presenting for building permit upon approval. So that's why there's been a slight change, just again because of feasibility and not enough room to fit the double car garage and have a stall next to it in a 33. We had to adjust it a little bit.
So, and I guess we would have had, I guess the drawing that I'm looking at is a little different in that it appears that you could come out of the garage without having to go around the car. On your drawings that I'm looking at here on the screen, it looks out at the house on the right, it looks like the car parked at the right side of the garage is going to have to sharp angle, and I guess, you know, just depending, I guess, on the size of the car and on the pad and where it parks. But it doesn't look on this drawing that it's as easy to get in and out. It's almost sort of like a half tandem type situation here.
With this garage, we did do obviously a maneuverability study for the vehicles to get in and out, and everything that we looked at, it did work. I mean, obviously from these kind of drawings, it's always difficult to conceptualize, but that's kind of what the engineers came up with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Would this, basically the backyard be all concrete?
That's the plan right now, yeah, to use paving stones or some sort of concrete for that backyard.
I can't remember what our permeable surface requirement or non-permeable ratios are for something like this. Does this meet that if it was concrete, or would it have to be pavers? A lot of coverage.
Ms. Tiffany, does this meet our stringent requirements?
Through your worship, technically, no, we do not have any permeable surface requirements. The applicant will be required to complete a Phase 1 stormwater control per the subdivision development servicing bylaw. So, in other words, when we have this amount of hard surface on sites, the solution is an engineering solution to manage it.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much, sir. Councillor Zerillo.
Yeah, I just had a question about this drawing that we have up in front of us. It talks about asphalt driveway in the front. I missed that. So the
That's probably a typo. That's all along.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
Good eyes. No, it couldn't possibly be.
Yeah, no, the front's all lawn and, yeah.
I was looking, how could they get in there?
Yeah, that's a typo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good catch. All right. Are there any other speakers to this item? Rochester, are there any other speakers to this item? A third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item closed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next item, item 4, is an application to amend the citywide official community plan bylaw and the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw in order to revise the land use designation and zoning of 3438, 3441, 3450, 3451, and 3461 Queenston Avenue. These are bylaws number 4602 and 4603.
Your Worships and members of council, these bylaws are being proposed to facilitate the development of an elementary school Peak neighborhood plan area. The overall school and park site consists of 7 properties. One property along Princeton Avenue is already zoned P1 civic and major institutional. And the applicant is seeking to rezone the other 6 properties, P1 civic and major institutional, and the environmental sensitive area, creek area, at the western edge of the property between Princeton Avenue and Queenston Avenue, P5 Special Park. The existing land use designation on the site is primarily school park. However, the northwest corner of the site, 3441 Queenston Avenue, is designated for street-oriented village home, environmentally sensitive area, and large village single family. The applicant is seeking to redesignate 3441 Queenston Avenue to School Park, an environmentally sensitive area. The area outlined in black on the overhead. This is a preliminary site plan showing the proposed school and park layout. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, fourth, and final readings to City of Coquitlam OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4602-2015 and give second, third, fourth, and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4603-2015.
Thank you. I have two speakers registered. One is on behalf of the applicant being School District 43 and the City of Coquitlam, a joint application, is Devin Ross, Principal of Facilities Initiatives for School District 43.
Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. My name is Devin Ross, and I'm the Principal of Facilities Initiatives for School District number 43, Coquitlam. I am very pleased to come and speak to you about the proposed elementary school in the Smiling Creek neighborhood. This is a top priority for the school district to meet the enrollment needs on Burke Mountain. A small note is you'll hear me refer to this as Smiling Creek Elementary. The final name of the school is still to be determined, but we are using Smiling Creek Elementary in the interim. For the last several months, School District number 43 has been working collaboratively with the City of Coquitlam on the development of the shared Smiling Creek Elementary School park site at the corner of Princeton and Queenston Avenues. The school district and the city have purchased 7 lots at this location. The school district owns the 4 northern properties on the site, which contain or are proposed to contain the school building, playground areas, and the shared parking lot. Diagram is up there. The city owns the southern 3 properties, which is proposed to contain the sports field. Based on enrollment projections, Smiling Creek Elementary is being designed with a capacity of 430 students. This will include 19 classrooms. The district design team has worked with the architects to include best practice research and 21st century learning principles into the design, such as flexible learning spaces. In addition, school district staff worked with city staff on the incorporation of shared use spaces. These include a multi-purpose room, an additional classroom, and a meeting room. The parking lot will also be shared for school and park users. In addition, the city will have an office and a washroom that are accessible at all times from the exterior of the building. As part of this work to determine the type of neighborhood learning spaces and potential uses the community would like to see, the school district created an online survey and hosted an in-person open house and consultation with the community. City staff co-presented with the district and highlighted our continued collaborative relationship throughout this process. These forums allowed the public to provide feedback on this key public site. Members of the public also had the opportunity to interact and ask questions of the architects, school district personnel, and city personnel. In addition, they had the opportunity to view the schematic diagrams for the proposed school. The information shared by the architects is accessible online on the school district website and has been viewed several hundred times. All programming feedback that was received has been shared with City of Coquitlam staff. On this top school district priority, we are under fairly strict timelines to be able to open in September 2018 as scheduled. We appreciate the city's support in moving through the city processes, including this OCP amendment and rezoning process in a timely manner. We anticipate the Ministry of Education's funding approval happening very soon. If there are any technical clarifications, we do have 2 representatives from CHP Architects present in the audience. Thank you for your time this evening.
We have one other speaker registered, and his name is Steve from Lighthouse Realty. I'll let Steve do a self-introduction.
Mayor Stewart, council members, thanks for letting me speak here. I'm speaking on behalf of Mrs. Sevo, and she owns the property that is adjacent. She fronts at 3428 Queenston, and she's adjacent to the soccer field that is proposed to be built there at this time.
And your full name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve Crestovy.
Crestovy. Thank you.
So we've met with planning a couple of times and are under the understanding that the property on Queenston at 3428 is developable into somewhere approximately 8 to 9 single family lots. And along with that, we've heard a couple of different scenarios, and one that would require her to donate some of her land to the street that is going to be built by the city there. I believe it's called Dayton. And then we've also been told that that is not the case, that the street will be built on the property that is already presently owned by the city. So I guess my request here is that when it comes to that time when the street's being built, that the city consider building the road with city-owned land versus taking property from Mrs. Sevo's land, because if that is done, it will considerably diminish the value of her land by the amount of lots that will be developable.
Okay. I'll let you complete that, although it has very little to do with whether the land use is appropriate on the adjacent parcel, because tonight is about whether or not the proposed land uses for these parcels are appropriate.
Okay, so it's nothing to do with the...
And so while I understand where you're going, and I suggest you would have some more dialogue with staff, and so I'll let you complete, and I won't rule you out of order or anything.
Good enough.
But I thank you very much for coming out. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? I suspect it's not because of a lack of interest in schools in Burke Mountain. Is it, Councillor Hodge?
Looking at, certainly it's only questions at this point here. Looking at the road diagram here, Queenston looks like it comes around and it makes, this is on our attachment 2. And I guess because what the proposal is to close off Queenston, incorporate it into the building, but it leaves a piece of Queenston coming down on this one here, proposed turnaround. Is that the full proposed build-out for Queenston? Is that actually just going to be a turnaround? Is it projected to extend down? I'm just sort of wondering what's the plan with that sort of corner there, or that cul-de-sac?
Mr. Donovan.
Through your worship, this portion of Queenston is primarily being remained open to provide access to the two southern lots. There's no plans to extend Queenston further down south in the future. Depending on how the two lots do subdivide, there may be in the future the ability to close even a portion of Queenston. And that's the long-term vision of this remainder leg of Queenston that's staying open.
I see. So that's what I guess what I'm looking here. It says looks like 36. So that's actually providing access to existing homes right now. And so once we see what happens with them and those properties, that will determine what the ultimate build-up for the road is. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? This is it. Seeing none, I'll declare this item and the public hearing closed. It'll take us a few minutes to change tapes and rewire for the public broadcast of the council meeting, and we'll do that as soon as we're ready.